Welcome everybody to another episode of I'm Just Saying. Here I'm your host at Shelly D with my co-host at That Starts. How you doing today at That Starts?
Great.
Awesome. So we got a great topic for us to all discuss on today. We're going to be talking about guilt or conviction.
Whoa.
Man, now this is one that gets everybody. I know that me and at That Starts are not alone when it comes to knowing the difference between guilt or conviction, how to let it go, how to address it, and how to confront it. So let's jump right in. So first of all, what is guilt? So guilt is something that's a fact of having a committed or a specified implied offense. The key word here is implied. Also, it makes someone feel guilty, especially in order to induce them to do something.
Wow.
So basically, some examples of guilt is like, if you say you're gonna call somebody back and you don't, you may feel a little bit regretful about that. You may feel a little guilty, or you forget to pick your kids up on time, so your kids is waiting, maybe like the last person at the school to get picked up. So those are some examples of guilt in like a very mild sense of the word and definition.
Okay.
Also, guilt is one of the things that holds regret.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the things that we just really have against ourselves. It's very hard for us to let go and get over. Have you ever been in a position where I'm sure you have, where you felt guilty about something that you did or that you failed to do?
Yes, lots of stuff.
Give us an example at That Starts.
Man, I felt guilty. I guess one of my worst things is I'm not always showing up on time on some things. And it's not always my fault. There would be stuff, but beyond my control. But still, you always feel the guilt of you let that person down because they needed you at that time.
Right.
And you weren't able to be there. And when you feel guilty, you start analyzing in your mind, what could I have done better?
Right, differently.
Just to make sure it couldn't happen because of that guilt. And, so yeah, just sometimes I can't show up for certain things at the time I promised.
Right.
I would be there. I don't like to not be. I don't like being late.
Right, absolutely. We talk about that a lot on this podcast. That's one of my pet peeves that I'm working on. I'm still working on my attitude toward tardiness and people who struggle with being punctual. But I'm getting better. I must say that I'm learning to have a little bit more patience with myself and with people. Because sometimes I have been late. I can't admit to the fact that I haven't been on time all the time. But yeah, that's a good one. You can feel guilty because you put the person at a disadvantage.
Yes.
And that's something that we try not to do. Like when your blame or your fault now delays somebody else, or now it causes or contributes to someone else's, potentially bad day, or more frustration, or more, anger, or just anything that can hinder the progression of what they're trying to do. So yeah, absolutely. And that's exactly what guilt is. We'll get ourselves. Did you know that? So there's 3 forms of guilt?
I did not.
It is, and I was doing my research and I realized that there's natural guilt, there's toxic guilt, and then there's existential guilt. Existential guilt. I'm gonna say it right. Kind of a hard tongue twister. Existential guilt. Right. So you guys, so those are the 3 types. So let's break them down.
Mm-hmm.
Natural is like the one we just described. It's the remorse over something that you did or something that you failed to do. Okay. Picking your kids up late from school, being tardy, and someone else is working on your time as well.
Okay.
That's kind of like in the mildest form. That's like the minimal case of guilt that you will put blame on yourself.
It's like the most popular guilt.
Right. That's the one that everybody can say, yeah, I can relate to that. I've been in that position before.
Gotcha.
The next one is toxic, which is not being a good person. And what do you mean? Like, what do you mean by not being a good person? It's exactly it's self-explanatory.
Right.
Meaning that you will guilt yourself when you feel like you don't meet the standard of somebody else. Okay. So, for example, it's like mostly this toxic guilt is rooted from like past experiences. It could be from patterns in history. It could be from like patterns in your childhood and how you was raised, your belief in your faith. It could be things like that, right? As you guys know, we always have Barack here with us. So today he's very rowdy.
Oh my goodness. We're always raw and live and uncut.
Everything is how you get it. Look, I'm just saying, this is how you see it. But we're going to keep it moving. Barack, thank you for making your presence known. The next thing is existential guilt. We're not going to do this though, Barack. Although, this is very unprofessional, sidebar. But this is what happens when you're doing a real live podcast.
And animals do not feel guilt.
And you self-made. Yeah, Barack is not feeling guilty right now. Back to the point. Existential guilt, which is a negative feeling that comes from injustice in the world. So, I know we can all relate to that given the current climate that we all experiencing right now with racism and police brutality and just everyone feeling a little existential guilt. I didn't realize that till I started to research what was going on. Also, existential guilt can come from things that's happened in life. So for example, it can be social, it can be political, it can be suffering from like a country. Like, I'm big on pets, as y'all hear my dog barking in the background. I'm really huge on pets. I cannot watch the commercials when they show the abused dogs. Like, I'm crying. I can't watch movies where dogs are being harmed. Yeah. I'm emotional about it. Like cats too, like any pets. Like if they're being abused and attacked, and I'm crying. That's existential guilt. I'm feeling like there's nothing that I can do.
Right.
Or I'm feeling like, what can I do? So yeah, I'm a huge person. I'll send my 19 cents a day to, to help the dog that's in the shelter that, needs medicine and needs food, and they're trying to provide health care. Like, that's me. You know what I'm saying? I'm going, man, Michelle, you got to get out of this. But that's a form of existential guilt. So, and I know I'm not the only one out here. It may not be for pets like I am, but, again, in social and political injustice, people get very passionate about that. Right. And they begin to say, oh my goodness, what can I do? Like, let's just take briefly, and we'll say briefly only because we can go off on this topic all day. Given the political state and given the racism and police brutality and things that's going on currently with all of the, the misfortunes and mishaps, that can take people. It can become overwhelming. It angers you. And so you tend to feel like, what can I do? What was I supposed to be doing this time to prevent this? We have great leaders who, like MLK and Malcolm X, who was fighting for civil rights, but for existential guilt, you feel like, what was I supposed to be doing? What could I have been doing? Right. How could I have prevented this? How could I have stopped this? How could I have advocated for this, right. topic? Did I go vote? Did I do this? Could I have, right. What change could I have made? Right. And so existential guilt is the one that we don't talk about enough, because the natural guilt is the one that's most popular, like you said, at that starts. But we really got to take a look at all three.
Yes.
All three of them, I think, are very impactful when it comes to who we are as people, when it comes down to who we are as human beings. I think we have to really dissect and really understand guilt.
Right.
So those are three things of guilt. Again, traits of guilt would be regret, you blaming yourself, you feel like you could have done more, or what you could have contributed to it. It's a fault thing, like you feel like you're at fault. Like again, like if you pick your kids up late, you feel like it's your fault because you should have left work on time, or the traffic. Now all these things are unfolding and it has become a reason why you picked your kids up late. Or the toxic one, oh, I'm not a good person because I was raised to not like cats. You know what I'm saying? I'm not gonna make it so deep, it's other things I could have said, but oh, I'm not a good person because of the faith that I believe in, or people don't understand my opinions, or lack of. And then again, existential guilt is like when it's something that you feel sorry or you take on the burden of a suffering of a country, or people in Africa may not have clean water, and you feel like, oh my goodness, what can I do to?
Especially if like you're at home drinking your clean water.
Right, like if we got bottles of water here,
Right.
we balling out with water, and then you see something on the television, and this kid is, dying of thirst, he's dehydrated because they don't have clean filtered water, and so now your heart, you're feeling guilty about that. You feeling like, okay, what can I do? This shouldn't be,
Right.
The next thing we're going to talk about is conviction. So we're going to give y'all the breakdown of guilt and conviction. So right now, we all know what guilt is, and we can keep going on with examples and scenarios about guilt. Mm-hmm. We're going to also tell you guys how to overcome these things. So the thing about conviction, which conviction is kind of shorter than guilt. We spend a little bit more time on guilt. But conviction is a firmly held belief or opinion. It can be a formal declaration that someone is guilty or of a criminal offense. So just like if you go to court, if you rob a store, you got cited by the police, they took you to jail, you go before a judge, the judge was like, all the evidence point, I see you on camera robbing the store, holding up the cashier or whatever, you are guilty. A jury has said you are guilty. That's a conviction. So now you have a charge that has been proven against you. So that's different from guilt. You know why? Because guilt is uncertainty. Guilt is an implied offense.
Right.
Conviction is certain. It is no way that you can really refute it. You can refute or dispute it, but once that jury, that judge, or that matter has come before a court of law, you have been convicted of that charge. So that's a certain charge against you. It's firm. It is strong.
Right.
You can keep appealing it, but 9 times out of 10, it's gonna stick with you for many, many days, right?
Yeah, sure will.
So those are the difference. So you have guilt that's implied, uncertain. You got conviction that's certain. It's declared, right? One of the biggest things too in the difference is in guilt, one does not feel a rate of redemption, but only feels condemnation. Now this is where it starts to take a turn. It took a turn for me because I'm going like, what? I'm like, I gotta research that a little bit more. What is that saying? Basically what it's saying is that in guilt, you feel like you don't get redemption. Like you don't get a second chance. I just break it down to simple terms. You don't get a second chance. You don't get for someone to have any empathy or remorse, especially with yourself. You just feel like, I'm beating myself up about it. I'm holding myself accountable for this. I can't believe I did this or whatever. And you're going to just constantly harbor all these residual feelings. You're going to constantly replay this over and over again in your mind, right?
Gotcha.
So that's what the guilt is. But then the conviction says it's the revelation of a sin or a wrong done. But you can get redemption from a conviction.
It's strange.
Right. And that's something I had to decide out when I was researching. I was like, you can get redemption from conviction, but not from guilt. And so, me, being a Christian, being God-fearing, I was like, okay, Lord, you got to really break this one down to me, because how can you be redeemed of conviction, which is a firm, certain decree that you did a thing,
exactly.
You did a wrong, but from guilt, which is just implied, an implied offense, or that someone may say against you, you don't get redemption. It just blew me away.
That blows me away.
So, I had to really, really go deeper with that, and I was like, man, I got to figure out, Lord, with your help, why? So do you guys want to know why?
I definitely do. You got to unpack this.
Yeah, this one had to be unpacked for me as well. Well, let me tell you why.